Next we'll take a look at how the tachometer sending unit mounts on top of the distributor. You have to just simply remove the cap and then the rotor, and then the sending unit goes on next. And you just put that on, and there's a little notch to mate into the slot here, and make sure you get that on good and tight once you put it on. Then the rotor would go on top of that, and once that's on, then the distributor cap just goes on top of that. And you just push everything down good and tight, and then you have the tachometer sending unit mounted on the distributor. What I showed you a moment ago was the sequence of how the units go together. There are a few things that you have to know, of course. This little flat area here on the sending unit has to match up with this on the distributor, just like it did with the rotor. You can't just jam it on there. Once you get it in the right place, then it'll go on. And you also, once you get that in place, you want to match up the little index tab here so that that goes in. But what I want to stress is that when you do get it to where you start pushing that down, you don't want to really exert a lot of pressure on here. You just want to push it down till it goes in place. And if it takes more effort, Stuart Warner suggests you take your screwdriver hammer handle and just tap on it a little bit. It's even more critical when you're trying to remove this, because it could have been rusted on there a little bit after being on for a number of years, and you don't want to just grab and pull that whole unit off, because you'll probably crack all this area right in here. And as strong as this may be, that's a lot of asking a lot of that material to handle that. So what my friend Brent Hagen suggests is that you take a vice grip or something, put it on here, and then just hit that with a hammer and lift that off, because this is much more of a solid piece than this is, and chances are you won't break anything that way. So just one more time, when you're putting the unit on, you want to push here instead of here, and when you remove it, you want to try to grab it from here, and if you can't, you can try the vice grip and the hammer routine that Brent Hagen suggested. Once you have the whole unit assembled, you'll find that the clip to hold the cap down isn't long enough. So there's a little extension that you have to add. It just simply slides on, and that gives you the extra reach you need. And usually that'll stay in place pretty well, but it can fall off. So to have a little extra insurance, you just take a cotter pin, slide that in there to hold that in place, and you've got sending unit mounted on a distributor. Once the sending unit is mounted on the distributor, it has to connect somehow to the tachometer in the dash. Both of these units have a 3-prong plug, and there's a special cable that makes the connection between the two. It goes right through the firewall, and once they're connected, the only thing left to do is to mount the black wire to a good ground and the red wire to the resistor, and that's the total connection. On 1956 Golden Hawks built in South Bend, the tachometer wiring was done this way. The ground was connected to the bolt that holds the resistor in place, and the hot wire was then connected to the resistor. This is not the way the Stuart Warner instructions indicate this is to be done, and I'll talk about that in a second, but this is how it's connected on 56 Golden Hawks produced in South Bend. On cars produced in California, they seem to follow the Stuart Warner recommendation of mounting, wiring up the tachometer. The red wire would go to the ignition IGN terminal on the ignition switch, and then the black wire would be grounded usually to a gauge nearby. That's the way the instructions read, and that seems to be the way they did it on the cars produced in California, yet the cars in South Bend were wired up the way I showed you earlier. Either way seems to work, and that's the way you would wire up the sending unit cable. I just want to repeat what Stuart Warner emphasizes, and that is that every component in this setup should be very securely mounted, pushed down all the way, and make sure all of the little mating tabs line up. And once everything's in place, you shouldn't have any problems, and your Tach should work fine.